just by way of review, and I'm sure this is a review for most of you, as to what pivot. Just been going to click on that mouse. One click. Now one click here. Okay. Apparent temperature, what it feels like outside. The equivalent, this is the AMS definition. The temperature perceived by humans cause the combined effects of air temperature, relative humidity, and wind speed. In the winter where I am, it's very cold and windy, so we use wind chill. In the summer, we use the heat index, as you've been hearing. What seems to me a little unusual, we will typically use them every day whenever we talk about the temperature. We'll also add in the apparent temperature, so it's very common for us to do that. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got to these things, how these things were developed. This is the wind chill, and this is how it started. This is an Arctic explorer, Paul Cycle, and he and his co-author Passel. What they were exploring in the Arctic, and in 1945 they decided that the cooling effect of the wind also affected them, and so they created the wind chill. And this is the formula that they came up with after combining how much cooling you have in water based on the effect of the wind, and they came up with this particular formula. And this was the wind chill that we used in the United States for many, many years. And so whenever people would talk about the temperature, they'd also say, but it feels like something worse. And we had this wind chill. And one day, when back in the 1990s, it was extremely cold and extremely windy in my city in South Dakota. And it was so cold and windy, they sent me outside. I'm sure you can't hear this bell, but they sent me out to the airport. And here I was on a day with the temperature was minus 22 Celsius. The combined with the winds of 77 kilometers per hour, with a wind chill, they said, according to the old formula, felt like minus 54 Celsius or minus 65 Fahrenheit. It's kind of interesting here. Here's how windy it is. There's no one in that plane, and you can see the propellers going around. So it was extremely cold and windy that day. And I use this as an example because I know that on that day at the airport, which is where the conditions were measured, the wind chill, based on the old formula, it said I felt like minus 65 Fahrenheit or minus 15 Celsius. Now, eventually, the weather services of Canada, the United States, and Great Britain all kind of got together, and they decided to do a study to see really what the effect of wind chill was. And what they did was they did actual experiments. And the study was finally published and put into practice in the United States in 2001. But here's how they did it. Up in Canada, they had people in wind tunnels, and they said everybody, all the subjects, had to have a height of 5 feet. And they had them walking into a window just 3 miles per hour, so 4.8 kilometers per hour. And what they did was they trying to find out how much heat loss there was. Here's the formula they came up with in metric units. They also had to correct for, because winds are measured at 10 meters. They actually included a little bit of a formula to reduce that to ground, because they wanted to see what people felt like on the ground. So what they did was they measured the heat loss on these people's faces. This is a wind tunnel. You can see them walking on the treadmill there. And then they took these faces and they used thermal imagery and they modeled the face. And the whole idea was to find out what it felt like walking into the wind for the average person. And they came up with this wind chill chart. And this is what we use today. And it was a little bit different. The formula, the numbers ended up different under the new formula, and because they decided the old wind chill overestimated the cooling on people's faces, and so they redid the chart. And I showed you the previous example. It said at the time I had a wind chill of minus 65 Fahrenheit, minus 54 Celsius, and they decided using that same example, the actual wind chill was probably from
minus 42 Fahrenheit or minus 41 Celsius. So you can see that they thought that the old wind chill overestimated the cooling of the wind and the cold versus face. Now, in the summertime, we talked about a little bit about heat index. I wanted to mention kind of how that came about. And that is, of course, and a lot of you know this one because you use that this much more than wind chill in the United States, but how it feels like with temperature and relative humidity. And that is the formula we use because the higher humidity values and the same temperature feel warmer or more stressful. That is what we put typically on television. It's in widespread use. If any day of the summertime, we'll say the temperature is this, and it feels like this with the combination of the heat index and that. And that is what we have had. But of course, there's problems with that. The main one being that we measure heat index in the shade, and the sunshine has that. And this goes back to what Scott was talking about earlier. The sunning has to be included, and we also have the mitigating effects of cloud cover and wind speed, which of course reduces the stress put on by the heat index. But any effect, at any rate, that is what we've had in effect. And Scott also mentioned that the use of wet bulb low temperature has ebbed and flowed over the years, but wet bulb low temperature really gained traction. I would say on this day, at this place in a bowling, this sky. Um, our photographer was out at the practice of the Minnesota Vikings, my football team, in Mankato, Minnesota, in July of 2001. And this is a player named Corey Stringham. He weighed 340 pounds, which is 154 kilograms. And this is a hot, humid, sunny day training in Mankato, Minnesota. So here he is. There's locker rooms right behind here. And he just came out and he had a brief chat with my photographer in a good mood. He can't there. He's happy, having a good time, and all seems fine. Goes out to have practice, and here he is, big guy, and you can see he's covered with all this equipment, helmet, shoulder pads. There's no fat on this guy, all muscle. So he did practice, and right after practice, he went into the building behind and was not feeling it. And he lay down, and 3 hours later, he was dead. A perfectly in shape football player. And this is kind of the day that if the use of other indexes like the wet bulb globe gained traction for sports, it was that day. Um, a an institute was formed. I think it's in Connecticut. I can't remember. I think it's Connecticut. The Choriosphere Institute. And what they do is they're real big on studying the effect of weather on athletes, and they have really pushed wet bulb low temperature. Scott showed earlier these little devices. I'll pass this one around actually. They vary costs. It's metallizable woe to measure the solar insulation. There's winds, there's temperature, humidity. That's a cheap one. There's a lot around. But this group actually has started setting them out to high schools. In some states, they are required to use them before sporting events because they want to keep track of the stress on the athletes using the wet bulb low temperature. So again, what you'll see there is this little thing. In any case, they actually have standards that they send out to the schools and to the colleges and to whoever's using them that tells what, based on that wet bulb globe index that they get on these little machines, how long they can practice. For instance, when and I apologize, this is in Fahrenheit, but 87 to 90 Fahrenheit, it tells you how long you can practice. In football, if you're wearing the helmet, things like that, it tells you how long you're supposed to go. And let's see, rest breaks each hour, 4 minutes apiece. If it's really hot and humid, there's limitations as to how much they actually can work out. So that on my way here, I was stunned at the airport. I'm sitting in the airport watching television, U.S. Open tennis, and I've never seen this before. At the bottom of the screen, I see wet ball globe temperature. I've never seen this before. The broadcast of the U.S. Open in the United States, they were doing an explanation of wet ball globe temperature because there's a rule now. If the wet ball globe temperature is above a certain number, in this case, 86.2 Fahrenheit, they have to close the roof on the stadium to protect the players. And you can see these fans here with water going into them to try and cool off the fans. But this guy was doing a big long explanation. The sports guy at the U.S. Open tennis, what wet ball below temperature is. So that was a shocking thing for me. Now, in the they're trying to expand the use of this in the United States. Weather Service offices are trying to pay closer attention to wet globe temperature. Something that I don't know how this is going to work out. This is an experimental wet bulb globe temperature forecast. Now, what they have to do is they have to chief and look at the formula because they don't have little sensors everywhere. So they include sun angle, and they try and use the forecasted cloud cover and the forecasted wind speed and the forecast of humidity. But anyway, I thought this was kind of interesting. I pulled this on Friday. This is the forecast for today, 5 days out, trying to forecast the wet bulb and cold. But you can kind of see there, obviously, the southeastern states in the United States are where it's hottest and humidest. But anyway, so that is, I guess, growing in importance in the United States, and that's just how we applied a few indices. Thank you for